Okay, today I'm with Johnno Spence. Thanks for agreeing to talk to us today, Johnno.
No worries.
From JSC Comms. We get straight to it. What is it exactly your business does?
We are a PR and sponsorship activation company that specialises in the world of horse racing, rugby and cricket mainly. And we also do quite a lot of different events across London for charity and testimonials and things like that.
So you've, just going back to your sort of beginnings, you went to Harrow,
Yeah.
which is a hotbed of racing. Quite a few of my interviewees have hailed from Harrow. And you're also a bit of a sportsman, first team football, rugby and cricket. Was there time for horse racing? Was that your main interest or obviously just other sports?
Yeah, my housemaster, I remember the first day when I was 13 arriving and ordering a racing post every day, and I remember it causing a lot of humour with my housemaster and house tutor, as the only racing post used to come to my room every morning. So definitely found time for that as well as playing lots of sport.
Was there racing in your family background?
Yeah, I grew up. My uncle David Morley, mum's brother, was a trainer, and he trained Soleric for Dad, who was bred at home to win the Ascot Gold Cup in 1997, which was definitely the highlight of my sort of racing career, I guess, in terms of ownership. When Pat Edry took a pull, upsized classic cliche, just approaching the final furlong, it was a pretty special day. And then Dad was senior steward at the Jockey Club, and was involved in lots of different racing politics, and so yeah, very much in my veins.
Right, so I saw, well, I've reading up on you. You described it extremely well connected, so this would explain, at least in the racing industry, why you would be.
Yeah, I always used to go racing with my uncle and Dad as well, as much as I could, sort of growing up. So I guess I met a lot of people from as a teenager to the early days. I remember Hugo Bevan at the early days of Windsor Monday nights and things like that. It was a great memory for my early sort of memories of racing.
Now you worked for Craigie Taylor originally. Was that similar sort of work?
Yeah, so having grown up in racing, I thought it was really important to try and go and get experience in other sports. I mean, obviously having played rugby and cricket, I obviously enjoyed that. So I did work experience at Craigie Taylor during the university holidays, and then they offered me a job working full time there after Bristol, and worked on Vodafone sponsorship the England cricket team, Famous Grouse Scotland rugby team, and then I did a lot of darts in the old days before Barry Hearn got hold of it. I used to run the press offices down in the sort of Circus Tavern and up in Blackpool, and then also they had Sporting Index when spread betting sort of first started. We looked after all their PR in the early days when Compton set it up with Lindsay McNeil.
Okay, so you left in December 2003.
Yeah.
And started JSC in 2004. What prompted you to do your own thing?
I guess I recognised the fact I sort of felt I'd got a lot of experience in the 6 years working at Craigie Taylor. They were a fantastic company to work for. The chairman, Marcus Robertson, who's actually still on the board of the PDC, actually the darts, and so I sort of see him down there when I go every year. But I sort of felt I'd sort of got that experience and felt there was an opportunity to sort of specialise as a horse racing and betting sort of PR agency, and also wanting to also try and get rugby and cricket accounts. But really the main reason for setting it up is I felt there was the opportunity.
So you didn't go into direct competition with them?
We came to an arrangement, I think is probably the best way of describing it, for any clients that decided to come with me, basically, and it was fine. It was still very amicable. I still see a lot of them, in London still now.
So why did you decide to go down the PR route?
People, I guess. I love working with people. PR for me is all about relationships, and as well as the sort of creative side and the sort of activation side. I think every day is different, and that's what I love about this job. Is sort of every day is a new challenge. Can be a bit frustrating, I guess, because PR, you're only really as good as your next job, so to speak, for each client. But I love what I do. I'm very lucky.
Okay, so I'm assuming that your love of playing sport was a motivation for specialising in it?
Yeah, obviously not as a jockey, but the rugby days, I played rugby up to Bristol. I was captain of UE for 2 years down there. And I think that whole sort of team camaraderie, I mean, I'm still best mates with all the people I played sport with at school and university, and I think that's a lovely ethic to have in work as well. Sort of, it's a team game, and we're a very close team here at JSC.
It must have been quite nerve-wracking when you set up and you did your first commission. What was that? Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, well, the first account. Yeah, Kempton Park and JCB were our first two clients, actually. Understandably, there were a few clients that sort of, I think, wanted to see how we got on. But I remember working, Annalisa Balding, well, now she was Williams, then married to Andrew, was my sort of first teammate, and we literally worked out of my house in London, set it up, worked around the conservatory table every morning. I think our biggest coup probably for JCB, not that Cheltenham were that impressed, is when we painted the 50-metre square JCB logo on Cleve Hill, which sort of went down under... Well, they were official sponsors of the Triumph Hurdle. In those days, they sponsored Ruby Walsh as well. But they were a great client to work for, and it's good to see they're still involved now.
Excellent. So I'm looking down through what you offer. Can you sort of describe briefly each one, what it actually is?
Well, the sponsorship activation side, Investec would be probably the best example of sponsorship activation. We've worked for them on their sponsorship of the Autumn Internationals, the rugby, the cricket. They sponsored all Test cricket in the UK. Obviously, the Investec Derby, and then the GB women's hockey team. And basically, it's all about our relationship with the media and the different press rooms in cricket, rugby. It was actually amazing, having not worked in cricket and rugby for probably 10 years, walking back into the press rooms in both those sports. About 80% of the names and faces were still there. So it was great to catch up with them, and it's also about coming up with new, fresh ideas. I think I learned very quickly building relationship with the stars, the players, the cricketers and the rugby players, the jockeys, the trainers, is really, really important. And I think demonstrating to them what you can do for them has been a real sort of learning curve, I think, for both of us.
Right, okay, and cross-fertilisation, what is that?
I think some of the most creative ideas and biggest successes we've had is basically working across different sports. So, for example, Maddie Hinch, the GB women's hockey team goalkeeper, we did a training sort of regime with the Tottenham Hotspur goalkeeper. I think it was Brad Friegel in those days. That'd be right, I think, from those days. So basically, they were sort of put through their paces, and we sort of compared, how each of the sort of football train and then the hockey players train. And then we've also done some really fun stuff for 32 Reb. We had Paddy Brennan and Carl Frampton, the boxer. Basically, we got Paddy to go down to Carl's gym and do some boxing with him and skipping and weights, and it was really good. And then Carl went down to Fergal O'Brien's yard and basically, went on the equisizer and loved it. And I think content, this digital content era, as we sit here looking at a camera, is obviously, that's something I've noticed the most and learnt the most in the last sort of probably 3 to 4 years, is that, sadly, newspaper circulation figures are in huge decline, and the digital content is really everything. So we're able to provide, as a company, videos ready to go through Sam Laurie in our office here. Basically, he can provide the newspapers that they can, really good quality content that they can use online. So that's been the big change, really. Although the relationships, obviously, with the individuals is still key and crucial. particularly on the bigger features. You know, when they're doing interviews with the likes of Paul Nicholls or Ryan, or clients like that who we represent.
Yeah, and you must be building relationships all the time, because just to sort out that with Fergal and other people, that must be a massive part of the business.
Yeah, and I think in racing, I'd like to think, we've built up a really good client base. We've got a real different array of clients, from race courses to bookmakers to individuals, and 9.5 times out of 10 they sort of work. It all seems to work pretty well across the board, and I think that's the sort of really important thing for us, that sort of angle.
Now, how do you take on jobs that you don't actually believe in, and if so, how do you work around that?
Good question. No, we don't always take on client approaches. Well, I've turned down a number of clients since I set up JSE. The representation side, it's a very small pond you're fishing in, trying to get jockeys and trainers sponsors, and it's not a big pond. Also, some of the younger jockeys obviously can't be sponsored by bookmakers, so it's even harder to get them. It's the old thing, racing suffers from lack of high street names as part of the sponsorship portfolio. There are very few. Investec, Randox Health are not really high street names. Yes, they're fantastic sponsors of two of the most iconic races in the world, but I would love to see a Santander or a Waitrose, or like the cricket. Waitrose sponsors the England cricket team for ages, and I'd love to be able to sort of attract some new sort of blue chip companies, high street brands into racing.
Now, you mentioned jockeys and bookmaker sponsorship. There's, see, today even the Racing Post are talking about it again. What's your personal opinion
of
jockeys being sponsored by bookmakers?
I think it's all so closely monitored now, and it's all, there's no sort of whisper, secret phone calls going on. It's all very open stuff, and I think the advertising standards agencies have got involved a little bit on the sort of the blogging and Twitter side, social media side in particular, that you have to put sort of hashtag ad to make sure people are aware that it's a bookmaker sort of blog. Of course it's right, underage gambling is a huge problem in this country, and but I don't think bookmakers sponsoring jockeys is adding to that. I think people, it's going back to the digital content. People want to hear from the Nico de Boinvilles, Unibet, Nicky Henderson. They want to hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak. They don't want to wait and read it in the newspaper 3 days later. Yeah, instant gratification these days. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you said there's a big problem with underage gambling. Do you think there actually is, or is that hyperbole? I mean, I find it very difficult to imagine that a child could get a bet on, especially online, where most of the business is done these days. I mean, I don't know the stats. It was probably a bit of a generalisation. But I would thought it is pretty easy to do it online with credit cards, and you can basically, I imagine it's pretty easy steps to setting up an account, and away you go. I'm not, I may be talking out of turn there, but it's clearly, there wouldn't be so much focus on it, I don't think, in the press if there wasn't a problem. So it does the sort of toxicity of gambling these days make it more difficult to promote horse racing and get the big sponsors that you'd like to get? Yeah, we got bookmakers play a massive and very, very important part in the racing industry. Without their sponsorship, racing would be in serious trouble. Prize money would be even worse. But it is the betting angle from first experience is a real turn off to a lot of, particularly the financial sector, like We got quite far down the line with Santander doing a big sponsorship deal, and it went to their board, and they said, how can we sponsor where there's gambling with money involved when we're supposed to be looking after people's money? So I sort of get what they're saying. And then Gucci were the same. We got very close to a sort of Global Oaks sponsorship, worked on it for years and years, trying to get it across the line. Again, final decision, and they went into show jumping instead, and are huge sponsors in that now.